Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm filming a video that I've been putting off, and that's my November wrap up. So the reason why I've been putting off my November wrap up was because this past month has been kind of sad for me reading wise. I only read 6 books, which I want to say that I know for some people 6 books is like average, or for some people it's like above average, and that's great for you. But for me, we all have different like reading standards and what we want out of our reading. I want to obviously read good books, but I also want to really read a lot of books, like quantity wise, because I have a lot of books on my shelves that I haven't gone to. So I usually read about like 10 to 11 books a month, and I obviously didn't get that, which is sad for me. So I didn't want to like talk about it in a video and like be like, oh damn, like I wish I read more this month, because I know that like at the end of the day it's not that important how much books you read, but for me it is. Either way, I'm finally filming this video, so yeah. So that's pretty much all I had to say before I start. So the first book I finished in November was Veins of Magic by Emma Hamm. This is the second / sequel book in Emma Hamm's Otherworld series, I believe. This is the only book that you have to read in a specific order. The rest of the books in this universe are like fantasy romances that can be like picked up individually on its own, but Veins of Magic is the sequel to Heart of the Fae, I believe, and it's a Beauty and the Beast Fae Irish folklore inspired story. So in the first book we meet Sorka, and she's one of many sisters, like adopted sisters, that live in a brothel. She herself doesn't partake in the affairs that go on at the brothel, but she does live there with her sisters and make sure they're healthy and make sure they're like safe, along with her father. It's like a weird living situation, but she makes the best of it, and her father's pretty nice to her, and her sisters mean the world to her. Unfortunately, in her village there's this like plague that's been breaking out. There's no cure for it. Sorka is very much into like traditional medicine, very much like druid work, I guess. The more established doctors in her village don't really care about what she has to say, because she's a woman and she hasn't like studied properly or whatever. So eventually she comes across a fae, and she strikes a deal in order to like get the cure for the plague that started to affect her father and will eventually affect her sisters. So she has to go on this journey to find this fae and complete her part of the bargain. That's pretty much it. It's a Beauty and the Beast retelling, so you can imagine she meets a fae that is kind of grouchy. This is the second book, so I can't really talk about the plot, but I will say that I don't remember much about what happened. I was only in it for like the good like romancy feels, and it did end like on a good note, I think. There were some like plot points or like info that was given to us regarding like this world or this story that I like, it felt like it came out of nowhere. Like the author was introducing like a lot of stuff in this fantasy romance that I don't know where it came from, I guess, but that could be me, because I didn't read book 1 and book 2 like immediately, one right after the other. Maybe it's best to like read pretty close together. So that could be me. I will say though that Emma Hamm's writing is like a perfect combination of like straightforward like writing with a hint of like pretty prosy writing, which is perfect for me. I personally don't like a lot of flowery writing, but this Emma Hamm's writing has just enough that makes it like interesting and fun. Overall, it is a pretty solid romance. There is adult content, so it's not like YA, there's like sexual content. Yeah, I thought it was pretty good. I definitely want to read more of her stories, some of the stuff that she's been coming out with recently, which you can see on her Instagram. It's pretty interesting. It looks really cool, interesting plots. So after that, I also read Arusha and the End of Time by Roshani Chokshi. This is a middle grade novel that was pitched as like Percy Jackson meets Sailor Moon with like Indian Hindu folklore myth injected into it. This is part of Rick Riordan's imprint with Disney Hyperion, where they publish a lot of middle grade novels that are inspired / influenced with different cultures. I believe Roshani Chokshi is Filipino and Indian, so its own voices. So in this book, Arusha's mother works at a museum that specializes in Indian like artifacts, culture, history. And Arusha and her mother live like in an apartment like above the museum. So she's pretty much grown up with Indian culture being a huge part of her life, despite the fact that I believe she's from Georgia. And she also mentions that she doesn't really fit in school. And because she doesn't really fit in at her school, she kind of lies and like makes up like tall tales to like have people like her or not judge her. And one day while she is telling one of her lies, she opens up this like base artifact thing at the museum and releases this entity that wants to bring about the end of the world. And that's kind of where our adventure starts. I thought this was a really fun, interesting start of the series. I love being introduced to new folklore or myth that I'm personally not super familiar with. Like, we all know Greek and Roman mythology. I personally don't know much about Hindu, Indian culture, even though I know it's like super vast. Like, that's the only thing I know about it, is that there's so much to go through. And there was a lot in this book. I'm so glad that there was like a glossary at the back, because I kind of kept getting lost. The characters went through a lot of like fun challenges. I really like how the rebirth / reincarnation element fit into the story. Overall pretty fun, interesting. I love Roshani Chakshi's writing. Roshani Chakshi also wrote one of my favorite like YA fantasy novels of all time. I definitely recommend if you're looking for more diverse middle grade fantasy books. You can't go wrong with this. After that, I listened to Lady Night by Tamora Pierce. This is the 4th book in the Protector of the Small quartet. I borrowed the audiobook from the library. So this series follows our main character, Keladri, who is a noble girl, but all she's really wanted to do is to become a knight of the realm. Because of some things that happened in other Tamora Pierce novels, women are now allowed to like apply to become knights. Keladri is the first one. Just because she's allowed to do that doesn't mean that she's going to have it easy for her. A lot of her peers, some of her instructors actually make it much harder for her to like complete her like training. This is the 4th book, so you can imagine how far she is in her training. She's no longer a page or a squire. She's Lady Knight. I love Tamora Pierce. I love her Tortal universe. I will say though that as far as like ending goes, this is probably my least favorite like wrap up to a series. I've read her Lioness Quartet. I've read the Wild Magic Quartet. I've also read the Becca Cooper series. This is probably my least favorite ending. It wasn't bad. It was just kind of like lackluster. Definitely compared to the other ones that I've read, it's not really comparable. There's some books that are like leagues above this one that she's written. I will say though that sometimes her books skew for middle grade, sometimes YA, sometimes more new adult. She doesn't really hold back on content. She will kill off kittens and children and puppies or whatever. And it's pretty sad sometimes. As much as I love Tamora Pierce, I couldn't give this a 5 stars because it just wasn't fantastic. I'd much rather read some of her other books, even though the 3rd book in the series was probably one of my favorite Tamora Pierce books I've read. After that, I finished Surreal by Garth Nix. This is a pretty huge staple in the fantasy genre. I would say this is YA since our character is kind of young, but I would say like general audiences can read this. In this book, we follow our main character, Sabrina, who's the daughter of a necromancer called the Aborson, and while she has been in school learning the magic of this world, her father goes missing, and she has to basically take up his mantle as the Aborson and find him and rescue him. And we have a pretty solid, fun journey. I love the necromancy here. I love the magical elements that we saw here, though I do think that the charter magic that is used in this world and the free magic that's also described in this world, I wish there was more explanation, even though in the 2nd book, which I'm currently reading, does explain that more. I wish it was talked about in the 1st book, like the actual introduction to the story. I also really enjoy the setting because Sabriel grew up in the southern country, which is more modern. They have modern technology like electricity. They have like modern like police, military, stuff like that, guns. The Northern Kingdom, called the Old Kingdom, is your like very standard like medieval type setting. So it's really weird seeing like a modern setting next to like geographically next to like a medieval type setting. I thought that was really different. I don't really see that a lot in fantasies. I enjoyed the characters. I thought they were really interesting. I thought Sabrina was really cool. I just wish they were fleshed out more because they became kind of flat at some point. They were not really like stereotypes. They just were there sometimes, and I wish I knew them more. There's a little bit of a romance, but it never at any point took over like the story. So I would say overall this is a pretty good series. I'm really excited to see what comes next. I just started Surreal, the next book, a few days ago. I'm not that far into it, but I hear it gets so good. So yeah, I'm pretty happy that I picked this up. I flew through some chunks pretty quickly, so it's definitely that type of book. After that, I also listened to Ember Queen by Laura Sebastian. This is the last book in the Ash Princess trilogy, which I've said multiple times how like under talked it is. I don't know about underrated because it is very basic, but I don't hear a lot of people talking about it, even though I think a lot of people would enjoy it. This series is about a princess named Theodosia. When she was really young, her country was invaded by this like enemy colonist empire, and her mother was killed. She was kept alive as like a political prisoner, also as like a political message that they've like broken down their princess and all that terrible stuff. The entire story is our main character trying to get back her kingdom and get rid of these colonists. I really like the ending. I think the best part of the series is all the emotional turmoil that our main character goes through. It's a lot of like emotional stuff. The first book had like the first book has trigger warnings for like whippings, like body horror and gore kind of. There's some scenes that were kind of graphic. She went through a lot and it's very heavy. I don't expect people to like love her. I think maybe some people might get annoyed by her, but she's gone through a lot, which is why I can like really criticize her for acting a certain way. I will say though that the love triangle was drawn out more than it had to be. I thought it was settled by book 1 and then book 3, and we were like still within this like love triangle. Anyways, the story was really emotional. I cried during the end, so maybe you might enjoy that if you like those kind of like heart-wrenching stories. The entries in this trilogy are also kind of fast-paced and quick, so you might, if you want something bingeable, this series is for you as well. And the last book that I finished in November was The Perfect Stranger by Megan Miranda. So this book is about a woman who's gone through some problems in her like career, and she kind of has to like uproot her life and move away because of some bad stuff that happened. And she runs into this woman that she knew when she was in college. They used to be roommates for like a semester, and when they meet up again, they kind of decide to move away from their current situation to literally anything else. And our main character Leah and her friend Emmy, the woman that she ran into, decide to move and start their life over again in like rural Pennsylvania. Leah, our main character, gets a job as a teacher. I wasn't like super sure like what she taught at this high school. I want to say like English or creative writing, but it was like never like established. She just gave her students like weird assignments throughout the novel. But yeah, they start over their new life in this small town, and one day there is this body that's found at a lake that's somewhat near their home. And on the same day that this body is found, Leah's roommate slash new life partner, in a non-romantic sense, they're not together, but I mean they start their life over together, so life partner, goes missing, and she files a police report. And throughout this investigation, she finds out that she doesn't really know her roommate. Her roommate's not the one that's body was found. That's a completely different woman. But Leah thinks that these two events are tied. Leah slowly realizes that she doesn't really know her roommate, despite the fact that they've lived together. Sometimes Leah sleeps in her bed. I personally was getting lesbian vibes, and that could have been like an interesting direction the book could have gone in. But no. That was sad for me. I thought we were going to get that, but we didn't. Throughout the novel, specifically, the police are kind of like questioning Leah, making her think that she's like not mentally there, even though Leah's like 100% sure of herself. I will say that this book is overall like okay. There's nothing wrong with this. There were some interesting things talked about in this book. I'm not totally sure how the romance in this novel added to the story overall. It felt like a romance of like convenience, like these two people just happened to be in the same boat, which is why they ended up together. I will say that I guess I was disappointed because Megan Miranda's, I think, debut novel was really well crafted. Her debut novel, like all the Lost Girls or whatever, was told in like a reverse format, like reverse chronological order, and that was really interesting. And this one was very straightforward mystery thriller that didn't really do anything for me. So it's like, okay, there's nothing wrong with it, but it's not fantastic. Also, I'm sorry about like these lights. I'm filming against a window and the window has like bars on it, so that's why you have this weird shadow pattern. I'm sorry. I also don't know how like believable it is that this 30-some-year-old woman would like upend her life, move somewhere else with another woman that she like barely knew and didn't like once question like her background. But what do I know? Maybe I have to like suspend my disbelief a little bit more, but now that I have read it, I can get rid of it. So I'm probably gonna unhaul this sometime soon. So those are all the books that I read during the month of November. I know content wise, like quality, I read some pretty decent books, nothing like terrible or like super offensive or problematic. Quantity wise, not so much, and that's kind of why I felt a little down about November's reading month. Let me know if you've read any of these, if you're interested in picking them up. I'd love to know your thoughts on any of these. I will link all my socials down below, and I will see you in the next video. Peace out.